So the tour manager at the time for the Foo Fighters had a tendency to explore thrift shops and buy classic memorabilia while they were traveling, and he happened to pick up a bowling pin one day, and when the band asked about why he bought it, he said he liked the color and the shape. And the band thought that kind of arbitrary definition of why he bought it was very funny, and that is why that is the title of this album that came out on May 20th, 1997. So yes, I started out the show with a fun little trivia fact about the album, but let's dig in. Let's talk about Foo Fighters, their second album, The Color and the Shape. Let's go.
Things are gonna change, I can feel it.
If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna...
Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records with Jacob Gibbons.
Okay, we've had a couple back-to-back just you and me episodes where I'm walking you through albums and I'm having fun doing it. I do have some guests that I'm hoping to bring on the show soon. It's just been hard to coordinate and schedule with everybody with the holidays and so much travel going on, but I'm having fun and I hope you are too. But let's talk also about my sponsor DistroKid and my special link that you need to be using. All you need to do is go to distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof and you get 30% off of your first year of uploads of your music. So I'm giving that to you. You should be using it. Okay. Every show I talk about it and you should take advantage. They have a app that you can use. You can give all the profits that you're making off your sweet tunes to everybody who's recorded in your band, your drummer, your bass player, your triangle player. Everybody can get a cut of your kick-ass song. So make sure you're using distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof. Almost didn't get through that one, but I did. But now it's time to talk about Foo Fighters. Okay, so I'm going to say up top, because here's the thing. Foo Fighters are a massive band, probably at one point in time the biggest rock band in the world, and still have a huge following and fans and have been around for a very long time. And, you know, it's one thing when I cover these albums like, you know, Portishead's Dummy, or I go deeper and I go to Sonic Youth's Goo, or I talk about these albums that mean a lot to me. But every now and then I'm going to address something that might feel very commercial and popular and kind of like, you know, won all the Grammys and all the awards and everybody knows every single song on the album, especially since this album has 3 hits on it, 2 of which you turn on, you know, K-Rock here in LA and you still hear these 2 songs, both the original and the acoustic cover of one of them that we will get to in a little bit. But I think it's important for me to point out when I do a band like Foo Fighters and Dave Grohl and how big this is. There was a time in the 90s where it wasn't like that. They weren't the biggest band, right? So I'm going to take you back to the way that we viewed the Foo Fighters in 1995, in 1997, before they become so massive. And also, look, with the death of Taylor Hawkins, with the controversy surrounding Dave Grohl, there's a lot of other things about the band that people talk about nowadays. But I just saw them, I think I just saw them at Riot Fest in 2023. Great rock show, put on a good show. I have not been following this band's catalog very much, other than like in the 90s, yes, but once we got to the 2000s, I would say I know some of the hit songs. I've listened to a few things here and there, but I didn't keep up with them. Not to say that there's anything wrong with being the biggest Foo Fighters fan in the world, but the reason I'm pointing out this distinction is it's very easy for us to think of something that's very popular and think of it only as this big mainstream success. You know, it's like, this is a weird example, but it's like Nicolas Cage, right? Nicolas Cage, we know now as this like huge star. You put him in something, there he is. It's Nicolas Cage. But in the early stages of his career, Moonstruck or Raising Arizona or Peggy Sue Got Married, he was this quirky little oddball actor turning up in things, delivering unique performances, and really leaving his mark on them. And then he would grow to be a superstar. I don't know. You could name a lot of things that weren't popular or big at first, and so you kind of are enjoying it, and then they just get to be so big. And Nicolas Cage is one of those people that you see him in movies now, and I still love seeing him in movies, but sometimes it feels like he's just like almost like a parody of himself. I mean, in that one movie where he just plays himself is so great. I love that movie. Anyway, this is not a podcast about Nicolas Cage, but the Foo Fighters in 1995, when we're first kind of hearing from Dave Grohl coming back out, this is a recording where he recorded every single part on the debut album by himself, except for Greg Doley from the Afghan Wigs plays guitar. And I think somebody else jumped in on that album to help with a few things. But it's the Dave Grohl show on that first album. He names it Foo Fighters because he doesn't want the pressure or to people to know that he's like, it's the drummer from Nirvana trying something, wanted to make it sound like he had a band. And he's recording these songs. It's cathartic, and he puts it out. And it's one of those albums that it gets way more popular than I think he anticipated. So now he's got to gather together a band, and he gathers together. And I've talked about this on the show before, because I've covered Sunny Day Real Estate and Diary in previous episodes and talked about how he grabs William Goldsmith, the drummer of Sunny Day, and Nate Mendel, the bass player of Sunny Day, and they become a part of this band, as well as grabbing Pat Smear from the Germs, who had also been playing with Nirvana a little bit near the end. So he's gathering together this band, and that's the touring live band that is the Foo Fighters, which I'm pretty sure I saw at a Q101 Jamboree one summer on one of those, smaller sets because they're a newer band during this time. But that is how we're introduced to Dave Grohl. And as him as a solo musician. We knew him as the drummer of Nirvana, but here he is coming out, and we're really seeing his personality and these music videos that are coming out, the Mentos commercial video off the first album. You really see this like funny guy with a lot of charisma, a lot of light, a lot to offer. And we're all so pleasantly surprised that the drummer from Nirvana is a good singer and a good songwriter, and he can throw together some tunes, and he can kick some ass, and he can scream, and it sounds awesome. It really does. I think on that first Foo Fighters album, I thought it was pretty cool, but it was the color and the shape. Then when I got this, I was like, this is a kick-ass album. It really was. I remember buying it. I remember listening to it start to finish, and I remember just the dynamics. It was slick. It was well produced. It was big. It was rocking. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how this came to be, how this album comes out in 1997. And it is a jump forward in maturity for him as a songwriter. And that came from hiring Gil Norton, the British producer who was famously a record producer for the Pixies. And Dave Grohl specifically sought him out because he wanted to make a slick rock record, but he wanted some of the interesting, creative, unusual dynamics of the Pixies, specifically Trompe la Monde. He was enamored with the arrangements and how that would come together, and he wanted to work with Gil Norton. So he brings in Gil Norton, and Gil Norton right away is like, first of all, we're going to push you lyrically. You're the first album is not your best lyrics. And Dave Grohl said, you're right. Absolutely. No, a lot of it was nonsense. It was just silly. I wasn't taking it too seriously. He's singing about "Innocent is pretty." I mean, that's an acne medication that he's singing about in that first album. But he gets pushed. Okay, you need to write about more serious things. And one thing that's going on in Dave Grohl's life at the time is he's going through a divorce. In fact, I think Nate Mendel went on record. He's like, this album, terrible things were happening the whole time. They lost their drummer, not to death, but leaving the band. Two people went through divorces. I know about Dave. I don't know who else was going through divorces. It just wasn't a walk in the park, and it was rough, and there was tensions and all sorts of things. But from this, Dave Grohl is trying to put together a more serious foot forward, and he's writing his feelings and using it as kind of a journal, a therapy session. And he even went on record to say the track order and the track listing of the Foo Fighters' Color and Shape is like the progress that he made. in through the therapy, going through the process of this divorce and coming out and being, I'm going to be okay in the end, being delicate and broken and falling apart and rage and emotion and all that. It's just like he's going through all of it all the way through. And you can really hear that in this album. But he's got the band that he's been working with. They go to record this album in Seattle, Bear Creek Studios in Washington. I don't think it's in Seattle. And they're putting together, and the sessions just aren't going well. Gil Norton referred to Nate Mendel and William Goldsmith as the rhythmless section because it was just not going well. But I have a theory, and I'm sure you might have a theory too, but here are these incredibly talented musicians. Nate Mendel, who is still in the Foo Fighters to this day, an unbelievable bass player. And William Goldsmith is one of my favorite drummers, and drummer buddies of mine adore him. Think he is innovative, and just his playing is fantastic. And I know so many kick-ass drummers that look to William Goldsmith and think that guy is just fucking amazing. And I'm fortunate enough to know William personally, and I've gotten a chance to meet him and hang out with him, and he's just a really talented dude. But here's these two guys from Sunny Day. They're being brought into this band, and there's just got to be a lot of dynamics at this time of, one, Dave Grohl is a drummer through and through. So he has a very specific idea of how he wants the drum parts in this album to sound. He plays a certain way. He has a certain style. He's picturing the songs as he's putting them together a certain way. And so whatever William is giving him, it's a losing battle. He just can't deliver what Dave Grohl pictures in his head. Because I don't think for 1 second that William Goldsmith wasn't up to snuff to handle this. No way. Dude is ridiculously talented. And actually, I think that some of his style and technique might have made something not sound like what we would know Foo Fighters sound like at all. Because what he would bring would have rhythmically changed things. And it would have made a very different sounding thing. And that was the problem, right? It just wasn't working. No matter how many times Dave Grohl was being a perfectionist, and I think he made him do 96 takes of a song and then another one record for 13 hours. And all this effort and all this energy to try to get these 14 songs that they tracked at Bear Creek Studios. And in the end, Dave Grohl records almost over everything that William Goldsmith does on this album. He goes in and he overdubs it. Dick move. I mean, it's a dick move, but it comes from somebody who probably didn't know how to handle it. Probably didn't know enough in his head that he could have been like, hey, this is what I think I want in my head, and I want to do it the certain way. I don't know. We weren't there. I wasn't able to be in the room, but you can tell that just the personalities clashed, and William didn't feel safe or respected as an artist and as a drummer. And that's one of the reasons that he left at this time, the main reason. But I'm sure there were others. But it was very difficult to have put all that time and energy, to have done 96 takes or however many and played for hours, and then to find out that your drums are being recorded over. Where he was told at the time that they were just being overdubbed. But it was Nate, his friend, his bandmate from Sunny Day, that was like, no, he's recording over pretty much everything. And there's only a few just small parts left of Williams drumming on this album. I think on Doll, and I think on some of the slower parts on, is it on My Poor Brain? Anyway, it's not very much. The verses and Up in Arms, maybe, I can't remember. But he's not really on the album very much. And this is where he's got to let that go, and Nate's going to be somebody who's having to figure out, okay, how can I hold up enough as a bass player and belong and play and do what this guy wants? But this is the thing, right? You know me as a Smashing Pumpkins fan, Siamese Dream is my favorite, and Billy Corgan had to act in a very dictator, like, this is the way it's going to be. This is the sound that I want. He had to push and take over control, and the album is my favorite album. So sometimes when an artist has a very clear vision and they align with the producer, Dave Grohl, Gil Norton, Billy Corgan, Butch Vig. They see what they want from the sound, and they work together, and it's like everybody else, get out of their way. And the end result is an incredibly cohesive, strong, probably their most famous album of all time. I think that is very hard to dispute because they have a lot of other hit songs, of course, but Color and the Shape is the game changer for this band. And it has to do, I think, with when you want something a certain way, you're going to get it. So it was unfortunate that it didn't work out, but William Goldsmith has been able to go on and play in other projects and continues to be a force to be reckoned with on a drum kit and is still the best thing that when you go see Sunny Day Real Estate, he's up there kicking ass and amazing, and I love to see him play. It's fantastic. Back to the situations on the Color and the Shape. So they're recording this album. They move out of the Bear Creek. They go to this one. It's in Hollywood. It's called Grandmaster Recorders or something like that, and it was a place that Stevie Wonder had rehearsed and played in, and the Chili Peppers ended up recording there, and I think it used to be an old silent movie theater, and I think it was also around this time being rented out for porn video shoots. So a lot of things happen at Grandmaster Recorders, but this is where they go to record the rest of the album, and he's laying down the new drum parts, and they're trying to figure it all out. But we open up this album with Doll, and Doll is got Williams drumming on it, but it's this soft kind of opening up, fearful trepidation. And this is what I was talking about, those feelings of this divorce, this relationship falling apart. And that's where you get Doll. But then just as you started this album and you think it's just kind of okay, where are we going? Then you get punched in the face with Monkey Wrench. And Monkey Wrench was the first song, the first video off of this album. And I remember I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought when he got to the scream part, I was stoked. I thought it was a great, fun, rocking song. Dave Grohl said that he had the riff when he was writing the song, but he didn't have the high part. That and when he added that in there to that song, he thought, oh man, everybody's going to hate this because this is not sounding like anything that's on the radio right now. This is just not the kind of droning, the heavier grunge that was really still, people say we're in post grunge, but he just said he just didn't think it was going to land, and he was surprised that it did. And it really did. It did for me. I thought that was a killer song. Everybody would get to that part, one last thing before I quit. And the secret of that part is trying to get through that whole thing without taking a breath. It's virtually impossible. But that is definitely a thing. We're actually going to be performing Monkey Wrench this Friday at our next Temple of the Dad show, and it's a tough one. I can't really do the level that Dave does, but I definitely will give it my all. You're damn right. So hopefully I'll share a clip of me doing my best take on Monkey Wrench. But that's the first single. It's a song about realizing you're the source of all the problems in the relationship, and that the person you're with, you're kind of wanting to no longer have them deal with the fact that you're the problem, so you're trying to get away, so you're saving them. And that is Monkey Wrench. Great song, great video. It's a jam. Then we get to Hey Johnny Park. Hey Johnny Park. I didn't know this until I started reading a little bit about the band. Johnny Park was a neighbor, best pal of Dave Grohl's growing up from about age 5 to 12. His neighbor, Johnny Park, was his best friend. And so he named the song Johnny Park, Hey Johnny Park, because he was hoping that he would write the song and it would help him reconnect with this old buddy of his. And it did. I read that on a message board, somebody asked him that years later. They said that, yes, he and Johnny Park, he reached out, they reconnected because of the song. So that's pretty cool. And to have a buddy that you wanted to reach out. And, apparently what is the song about? It's about, according to Dave himself, he said it's like 15 different things in this song of what it's about. But it's a great tune. It's a rocker. It's a good rocker. Then we get to My Poor Brain. This is a song that the dynamic shift is dramatic, because it's this classic kind of got this rocking, this is a blackout, and it's got that heavy, and then it just goes to this like really, I don't know what you would say. I think he said it was like going from Jackson 5 to, to metal or Sabbath or something. And that's totally what it is. It's got this like bounce to it, and then it jumps over. And then we get to Wind Up. Wind Up is another, this is where I was in 97 listening to this. This is another like absolutely crank in your car. There's this even part, that the way that it's going, I don't know if it's in drop D, but it's and then it like doubles up on the guitar right there. I love that part right there, but it's got this great scream in it. But then we get to Up in Arms, and Up in Arms is Dave says it's a typical love song. It's almost like a knack song. But it's just simple pop song. But there was something interesting that I had never caught about Up in Arms. It starts out with a slow version, right? It has the slower version, and then it does the sped up, more rocky pop rock song at the end. And there's a line where he says, "Always coming back, I cannot forget you, girl." And that's the line on the song. But I never caught before that when he does the heavier rockin' version the second time around, at the very end, he goes, "Always coming back, I cannot forget you, Gil." My ears had never picked up on that last time around. He changes it from girl to Gil, and that was specifically to the producer, Gil Norton. And he changed it there. And I had never caught it before. But there you go. This might be, it's not the biggest song on the album. It's second biggest. But this one really takes me back to 1997, to this time. My Hero. My Hero. First of all, it was like used in that movie Varsity Blues, so we were in high school and we're going to go see Varsity Blues, and you see this football scene where there's playing My Hero and just the drums on it, right? That's a very Dave Grohl drum intro right there. Because for the record, after William is out of the band, everybody knows that Dave Grohl would hire Taylor Hawkins for this album, but he would do it after the album was recorded, because he records all the drum parts, they're finishing everything up, and William has been gone out of the band, and Dave calls the current drummer of Alanis Morissette's band, Taylor Hawkins, and he asks him, "Hey, dude, do you know any drummers that I could get into this band?" And Taylor's like, "Me, this guy." And Dave is surprised that he's volunteering himself for this, because he's got this Alanis Morissette gig. And I don't know how they became friends. I'm sure people who are diehard Foo Fighters fans can say, "Oh, I know exactly the moment these two connected." But that's basically it. That's the summation of how that goes down. And he's brought into the band, and he joins and starts playing live. And so the fact that you see Taylor Hawkins in the music videos is the parts that he's playing in the music videos aren't his drumming. That's Dave's drumming. But he would make it his own own way. It was very tragic that we lost Taylor Hawkins, because he was just an absurdly awesome, talented drummer and just a cool, fun dude. And so it was heartbreaking, I know, for so many of us when he died, because he just had so much energy and fire and love and life. And I know people who know him, and who knew him and had relationships with him, and they just all said he was just a sweet, amazing guy. But My Hero absolutely was a song that Dave Grohl said, was inspired by Cobain and, his time with Nirvana, and talking about, a song that talks about kind of idolizing the wrong people, and then lifting up those who are like the regular everyday guy, the person that you wouldn't know as a hero. I love this song. I think it's a great song. We cover this also in my band. It's just got a catchy hook. It's a great song. It's another huge song off of this album. Not the biggest. The biggest one's coming. Then we get to See You, and See You is, kind of like this little ditty, and apparently this little kind of lighthearted ditty. Apparently Dave Grohl was the only one in the band who even liked the song. Like, everybody was like, "Nah, it's not any good." And the only way he convinced them to allow it to be on the album and continue on, ultimately he would probably get whatever he wanted, but he convinced them because he went in and re-recorded the drum parts, and he made the drums sound like Crazy Little Thing About Love by Queen. So he kind of imitated the drums of that song, and that's what he did to change kind of the vibe and the feel of the song, where everybody was like, all right. So something about that version and that drumming, that Queen sounding drumming, convinced everybody in the band, like, all right, we can put this on the album. Enough Space. This one is a kind of a cool story behind it. So apparently the song is about this film Arizona Dream, which is one of Dave Grohl's favorite films. But the story about how he arrives at this song is when you are touring in Europe over there, crowds famously there like to bounce. And whereas, American crowds do things a little differently. Now, I think that anytime I upload a video of me at a show here, I always hear from my English audience and people from overseas. They're always like, why are your crowds just standing around? Like, what the hell? There's no movement at all. So you get a sense that overseas and around the world outside of America now, people just go absolutely bananas at shows with jumping and moving and dancing and bouncing around. And I would say that in a lot of ways they're right. Like when I went to, then you'll go see bands like Idols, and you'll see, people getting crazy in pits and just chaos out there in the crowd. And I have to distance myself from that because otherwise I'm going to break a hip. But anyway, there are some shows that people go crazy at. I think it's just harder to tell if you're not close and you're not by the pit or the open floor area. And a lot of times you'll go to shows and there's like, seats everywhere and everybody's sitting down. I don't know what's going on in America, but there is definitely a tendency for people to be on most shows being chill here, except if you're going to like fucking Knocked Loose. So people can still get crazy in pits, but back to what I was talking about, this song, Enough Space, he was noticing that when they played shows overseas that the crowds would bounce. They would jump up and down. And he wanted to write a song that would be a bouncing song, a show opener that would get audiences in Europe to be bouncing like right away. Open the show and they're just jumping up and down. And when you hear the opening riff of this song, and you can kind of picture in your head just in a room full of people just jumping to that riff, and then it just all drops out to the bass and he's on the mic right there. And you're like, yeah, that's a concert song. That's like, let's get this party started. Let's get things going. But we get to February Stars. And this is my favorite song on the album. This was the one that really, of course you have the big hit singles and there's a lot of really great songs on this album, but there was something about February Stars that just always worked so well for me. You know what I mean? It's just the way that it builds. And then when it finally gets to the crescendo, because it starts out really, as my friends would say, it's that classic quiet, loud, but it's the way that it builds and then it all comes in with that February Stars. That's just, that was always the one when I was in the car that I was like, I love this song and I love the way that it sounds. This song goes way back to even Dave's time with Chris Novoselic and Nirvana, because one of the earliest versions of this song exists as something that says Dave/acoustic plus vocal. That was recorded by Grohl and Novoselic on a harmonium during Nirvana's last recording session. So this was an early idea for a song that Dave Grohl was experimenting with. And Kurt Cobain was very supportive and loved when Dave would write music, and famously had kissed him after hearing some of the music that he had written, sweetly, to say, how proud he was of him. So that was something that Kurt was really happy that Dave was doing, which was songwriting. So it's nice to know that a piece of music like this made its way from that time in his life with Nirvana and with Kurt, and then here it was. And the fact that it's my favorite song on the album, I don't know, there's something special about that. But here we get to Everlong, and this is the song. This is the one that is their biggest song in the world. And people have said it's their best song. I think it's Dave Letterman who said it was his favorite song. Everlong is a banger, and it's been played a lot. But if you can somehow get your brain to go back to the first time you heard it, it's a killer song. And this is what I was talking about at the top of the podcast about how we viewed this band. And I would say with this video in particular, when it debuted, I loved it. And it made me love the band even more because it was a Michel Gondry music video that had that surreal quality. First of all, he's one of my favorite directors. I love his work. And this video had that surrealist take. It had elements of Evil Dead, and Dave is dressed up like Sid Vicious, and Taylor Hawkins dressed up like Nancy, and there's these surreal ideas and concepts going along, and members of the band are dressed up like British teddy boys, and it's just got this great style and aesthetic, and the forest, the cabin, the waking from dreams, going back into dreams. When I saw this, it made me love it. I loved the song. I loved what I saw from this band on screen. Now, I didn't know that there might have been inner turmoil because Pat Smear would also leave this band shortly after the album would come out. He was burnt out and tired and didn't want to tour and didn't want to do anything. I don't think he was over the Foo Fighters, but he was over being on the road and just had known, people had known when he was in the Germs and he started playing, with Nirvana. People were like, how quickly until he quits out of all of this? And so he was known for kind of being somebody who that life wasn't for him. So he's still in the band, but he quits after a few months that the album releases, and then he returns in 2005, and he's been in ever since. But this song, Everlong, came together because Dave Grohl is sitting there. He's got his guitar in drop D. He's doing some recording takes, and he starts messing around, and he starts playing something that he likens to Sonic Youth's Schizophrenia, and that's where it begins. But he's reworking it. He works the idea together. Him and Gil Norton work on it together. He works on it independently back home in Virginia, and out comes Everlong. That is why I think this is one of those songs that really stands the test of time. It's a great song. The drumming on it is fantastic. That is Dave Grohl drumming on it. But of course, we would see for the rest of their career, for the longest time, see Taylor Hawkins doing it. And now we're seeing incredible drummers like Josh Freese handling that drum part. But every time I hear Everlong, I'm like, man, that's a classic, the best of Foo Fighters. And of course, an acoustic version of it also is very well known. That was just a spontaneous recording on Howard Stern in 98 of him recording it just kind of by himself, a slowed down acoustic version. And that version got just as popular. A lot of times you hear that more on the radio than the original. But we're nearing the end of the album. We get to Walking After You, which was another radio song that was reworked, because you had the album version of Walking After You, but then you had this kind of slicked up version, and I think it was for the Godzilla soundtrack or something like that. I may be misremembering that, but it was this, it's a song about getting dumped, losing the relationship, and it was, it's sappy. Oh no, it wasn't for Godzilla. I'm sorry. Correction. The X-Files soundtrack. I wrote it down in my notes because I didn't want to forget. I was thinking Godzilla. There was another song that they recorded for the Godzilla soundtrack. But the X-Files soundtrack had the Walking After You that was re-released and had more the oohs on there. But then we finally land on New Way Home, which is the closing song on the album. And don't let it confuse you. If you're on streaming services, I noticed that you get to the end of The Color and the Shape on Spotify, and it might be like this on Apple Music. It says The Color and the Shape is the last track on the album. False. That is a B-side. That is something that they've thrown there on the end. If you bought this album on CD, the last song on the album would be New Way Home. That would be where it closes out. So it's kind of deceiving when they do stuff like this in streaming versions, because I'm like, that's not how the album ends. It didn't have 14 songs. It had 13 songs. And it ended on New Way Home, which is this great, energetic, I'm going to be okay. You know, it's a song that like it drops out and then it speeds up at the end. And this is definitely like windows down, cranking, driving, going. This just feels like, yeah, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to survive. This is back to that point that he talked about up top, which is been through this relationship. It's ending. I'm divorcing. Everything's falling apart. I don't know who I am anymore. And you rise at the end and you go, I'm going to be okay. And that's exactly what New Way Home is. And the color and the shape, this B-side that's on here, cool song. And I feel like because it's a B-side from Bear Creek Studios, I think that might be William Goldsmith drumming on that little song there at the end because it wasn't on the album. I think that might be one of the tracks, the title track that they ended up throwing on this release. I don't know why they decided to do it and not say this is like a deluxe release there. But that, my friends, is the color and the shape by the Foo Fighters. And you could see that clearly Dave Grohl and Gil Norton got along very well during this because he did so many things to kind of honor him. You know, it's spelled color in the English way on Color and Shape for Gil. He changes that lyric that says, you know, Gil at the end. So he was really, they were in locked in step with each other in what they wanted to do. But I wanted to see if there was anything else that I had in my notes that I wanted to run over. But I think I did it. The color and the shape of 1997. That's what I'm sharing with you, because this was long before they were the big band that they are. And I don't have a problem with a band being popular. I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't know what it is. And I know a lot of you know what I'm talking about, which is when what you feel that you care about gets to a place where the market, it's commercialized, not always the band's fault. It's pushed out to the world. It's spread to the mainstream. It's on every station, every TV, in everything that you turn around and look for. And it no longer feels like it belongs to you anymore. It feels like it belongs to the world. And I'll give you an example of when I was kind of like, the Foo Fighters were not that big of a deal for me anymore. I want to say it was probably 2009, 2010. I was working at a company. I was working at NBC Universal. And my boss's boss, this guy out of New York City who was worth so much money, and he was really high up in the company at the time. And I remember he was standing there talking to my boss, and he left. And I was talking to my boss about him, and he said, that guy's watch is $50,000. This guy was wearing a $50,000 watch. And in the same conversation, I remember finding out that this executive at NBC Universal, which at the time was GE, that this executive said, my favorite band is the Foo Fighters. I don't know why that has stayed with me, but that's where, I mean, look, if you have a $50,000 watch, you're allowed to love the Foo Fighters, but it doesn't feel like it belongs to me. No band really belongs to you, but I don't know how to put this into words. Things, they escape from your fingers. And they escape from your sphere. And I think sometimes we like to feel this is why people gatekeep. You know, this is why music snobs love to be like, oh, you like this band? Name 3 songs. Because there is this feeling of ownership emotionally. It belongs to us here. It's connected to memories. It's connected to times. And when it gets more and more known by people, it seems to diminish that a little bit. You know what I mean? Like if you were to read a poem that was written for you about the death of your father or loved one, and it made you weep, and you were like brought to tears, and you're like, this is so amazing. This is brought personally to me, and I can't believe it. I'm so moved by this. And then you were to find out that same poem was handed to every single person ever who's lost a loved one or father or whatever. You would be like, oh man, I thought it was for me. And maybe that's the great lie that we tell ourselves about music is that these artists are writing it for me. They're not. They're writing it for, if they're good, they're writing it for themselves, right? Because if you're a good musician, you're not really writing it for anybody. You're writing it for yourself. It just resonates. I'm not saying that's every case. I'm sure sometimes an artist writes a song for people and it's good, but they say that if you're being true to yourself, that's the truest form of your art. But they write it for themselves. It connects with us, and we feel like we have ownership of it. And I think that that's what ends up making something that becomes mainstream or popular or commercial or something as huge as Nicolas Cage as the Foo Fighters, is it feels less intimate, less small, less like it could occupy a space with me alone in my room. And I'm going, it's just us. It's just me and you, Foo. Just us together, right? So there's nothing wrong with them being popular or having huge hits or, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that guy having a $50,000 watch and fucking loving the Foo Fighters. Good on you, man. Enjoy them. But we will always love to find something that's a little bit smaller, a little bit more intimate, a little bit more ours. But I do think the Foo Fighters are a talented band. I think that Dave Grohl is a talented songwriter, and I think he's put out some incredible music, and I think he absolutely has a place in rock and roll history as one of the biggest ones. His drumming skill, his songwriting skill, he's amazing. And the controversy that surrounds him and whatever that went on with his marriage and having a baby and all that stuff that happened, that's not my problem. That's not my business. I don't give a shit. I am here for the guy's music. If I had to do a complete background check on every single band that I listen to, I wouldn't be able to listen to half the bands that I enjoy because I'd have to just go through and be like, okay, well, did they ever do anything wrong ever? Well, then I can't listen to it. People can look at Dave Grohl and throw stones and go, he's terrible. What a piece of shit. And it's like, I don't know. Nobody's shining a light on you right now. Can I check your Google history? Can I talk to your former relationships and see, did you ever do something kind of shitty? Can I take a spotlight and just put it on you and display it to the rest of the world and say, don't ever hire this guy again because he did this one thing or they did this one thing? It's like, it's really easy to point fingers and judge somebody whose entire life is on display. That's all I'm saying. I think that this world judging people's character that you don't know and you're not intimately involved with, I just think you gotta find some hobbies. You gotta find some things to do with your time. You need to spend a little less time looking out and a little more time looking in my opinion. There's big issues out there in the world that we need to tackle. But when you're just going around and pointing the finger and being like, can't believe. Life is hard. Life is long. Things are fucked up. People make bad judgment calls. Things go wrong. We're not all perfect. We make mistakes. We need a little more grace, a little less judgment, and also mind your business. I don't know. Not everybody needs to comment on everything. Anyway, I'm getting on my soapbox here. It's just one of those things, right? Because when I heard the news about Dave Grohl, I got, there were a lot of things that I would read that I was like, Jesus, like, do you have any idea what's going on behind closed doors? Do you have any idea? You don't. You're just a person on the internet with a social media account who can type something and an opinion. So maybe I read one too many of those. I was like, I don't know. And it's not like I need to defend a guy or say, oh, guys, no, he's a multimillionaire, Grammy Award winning, gold, platinum albums. He's fine. He's living in a giant mansion. He's going to be okay. You can criticize him all you want. You can say that. You can say what you want. You can say what you want. But I look at situations like that and go, you need to find something better to do with your time. Maybe go write an album called The Color and the Shape. Maybe go do something. Join a pottery class. Make a puzzle. Do something. Be productive. That's all I'll say. Okay, that was the album. That was my Color and the Shape recap with a little bit of me getting saucy at the end. So let's leave it there. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. Once again, I always got to shout out Pantheon Podcast, this network of rockin' podcasts that I'm so lucky to be a part of. Thank you, Pantheon, for supporting me and putting me in your network and being there. And honestly, you guys need to be checking out a lot of other amazing music podcasts on the Pantheon network. They are so rad, and I'm so grateful to be a part of the Pantheon Podcast family. And also, don't forget to check out that distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof. Get that 30% off. So thank you for that. And I will also mention at the end of the show, I have an awesome new TeePublic store with a lot of merch shirts that I have just launched a couple weeks ago. I just did a Black Friday sale, and I have more shirts on this than anything, and I have a feeling the sky's the limit on this. I'm going to be able to make so many cool stickers and t-shirts and hoodies and hats and stuff like that. Like, I think this could be really fun because a place like TeePublic allows you to think of an idea, throw a design together, and it gets to be this like community thing where we come up with something together. You know, there's something that's said, there's like a conversation or there's a video or whatever, and we turn it into a shirt. And then people who like listen to the podcast are like, we know what this is. We know what this means because we're all in this together. So I'm excited about it. It's just a more collaborative space. So definitely check out the shirts on TeePublic that I just launched. But thank you again for joining me to talk about the Foo Fighters' Color and the Shape. We'll see you next time on Waterproof Records. Goodbye.
Things are gonna change. I can feel it.
If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna
Waterproof Records. Waterproof